Good afternoon, everyone, on a Tuesday right here at the Voice of College Football. We appreciate you stopping by for an SEC Media Days live session here at the Voice of College Football. Bring your comments and questions, leave them in the chat. We have scheduled a media rep from just about every team in the SEC. I think we're 12 for 14 right now, so be ready for a big blitz of SEC media coverage here for the next about an hour and a half, about 90 minutes here. And then we will continue, of course, tonight and throughout the week here at the Voice of College Football. And so, again, comments and questions, of course, the Amazon links in the description section. Please use it to help us grow the channel. We appreciate a like. We appreciate the share, everything that you can do to help us grow and build the channel. But SEC Media Days covers 4 days in Nashville this year. Typically, it's been in Hoover, Birmingham, Alabama. I'm getting my sports mixed up, but they're in Alabama. And of course, the announcement made by Commissioner Greg Sankey on Monday that it would move to Dallas-Fort Worth AT&T Stadium, I believe, next season to welcome in Texas and Oklahoma. But let's stay focused on 2023. We've got Kyle Loomis on the line from E2C Network, covering the Auburn Tigers. And again, if you get on over to E2C Network, it's here on YouTube, and it is everything Auburn. Auburn family all the time. Kyle, it's good to see you.
It's good to see you as well, Mark. Happy SEC Media Days. It's been a fun one already, and I'm obviously excited about today being Auburn's press conference day and media rounds day. But obviously, anytime we get the SEC teams together, wherever it is, that's obviously capturing the attention of the college football world, and for good reason. It's the best football being played right now. Championships speak for that, and I'm excited to talk about Auburn mainly.
I say it from time to time here. I would love to have a debate on the best conference in college football, but it's a waste of time. Right. So until it's no longer a waste of time, there is no question that the SEC is the best at the top and top to bottom. Now, Hugh Freeze hits the podium, or just did a few minutes ago. And of course, you took that in. I have yet to catch up with Hugh Freeze at SEC Media Days, but in rather a similar, an interesting situation in that when you mentioned the excitement of SEC Media Days and talking ball and hearing from the coaches, it's especially interesting to hear, number one, from a new head coach to the SEC. Right. But in this case, we get the rare former head coach in the SEC who, of course, had a job in between and now comes back to the conference. That hasn't happened too many times. It has over the course of the history of the conference, but a rare situation. And Hugh Freeze, we all know the past, know the challenges that face him, know the things that he's going to carry as a reputation until he redeems himself of such on the field. And so in regards to him taking over this Auburn program, what stuck out to you in regards to what he had to say?
You know, first of all, I'll cover the returning coach part of that. It's unique. It's an interesting storyline when you think about it, especially, and even though divisions are going away, when he's coming to a division with his former team. It's kind of serendipitous when you think about that, because it would have been interesting to see how that Ole Miss Auburn rivalry might have exploded even more than it's kind of been building over the last few years, if that had still been an annual matchup. Won't be after this year. Him coming back, he even admitted today during the press conference that when he left Ole Miss, he didn't think he'd ever get a shot back in the SEC. But he also did admit that as they started to have some success at Liberty, there was obviously that glimmer of hope. The competitor in him wanted to get back to the best conference in college football. And here we are today talking about him as the head coach of the Auburn Tigers. I'll tell you what stuck out to me. And I try not to sensationalize things a lot and really temper expectations sometimes when you come to a situation like this. And I think Hugh's done that as well. Since he got here, he's asked for patience. He's told fans to, not expect much at A-Day, which was true given the rain at the very least, and various phraseology like that. When Hugh Freeze walked to the mic today, I got a sense of more confidence than I was expecting from him. Still tempered confidence, still asking fans for patience, noting that there's a talent gap perceived there. Maybe his close. We won't know till we get out there on the field. But I walk away today feeling Hugh Freeze has a lot more confidence in what this season will look like and what the optimistic outlook might be for 2023 for Auburn.
When I see a coach or any individual that's in the spotlight coming back from a situation in which he, I want to say, endured in on one hand, but of course he was the culprit. He put himself through it.
Right.
At some point, I do want to see the remorse. I want to see the regret and all those things, but we're way past that. Now I want to see a guy who states that he's learned from it and he's a better person and he has learned from that. And we should all be learning every day of our lives.
Absolutely.
But that he's in the mode of learning and building from that, because we can, to beat up the guy for the rest of his career does no one any good. And we should all, it's my belief that we should be in the business of forgiveness and then moving on from here. So he's got a fresh start. I think it's amazing. And I wish him and hope for all the best. Did he talk about any particular challenges, whether that be on the field, off the field? You did mention the talent gap that he's going to have to deal with in catching up with an extremely competitive division. But in regards to his, vision of this program and building it.
Yeah, let's talk about two things, one off the field and one on the field. And some of that is interconnected as well. He brought up the word faith. And when he brought that up, as a Christian, he obviously is that and talks about that a lot, but he was more in the general sense talking about restoring faith, changing the mindset and restoring faith across the board. The big word over the last few days, weeks even, and even today was said several times, was alignment. From top to bottom, president, board of trustees, academics, athletic department, all the way through. There's a sense of alignment that is coming that maybe hasn't been there for quite some time at Auburn. And I'm not saying that's, one person's fault or another, but there seems to be a direction heading in that direction. So restoring faith, part of that, to do that, you have to have everybody going in the right direction, rowing the boat together. And so it feels like there's some acknowledgement from that, from some pretty big voices too. Andy Bertram, voice of the Auburn Tigers, on his recent podcast, talked about there seems to be an alignment that's very much appreciated by all parties across the board. So that's a challenge, right? You can say there's an alignment now, but you got to show it. And then you've also got to produce things with that alignment. The talent gap. That's the big question. We know there's a talent gap based off the results of last year and what we can perceive might happen this year. Maybe that perception changed when we get out on the field. Hugh Freeze said today that he knows the team has improved. And I would hope so when you have one of the best recruiting cycles of a first-year head coach in quite some time. And probably the best recruiting cycle that Auburn's had in quite some time too. So the talent gap may not have closed, at least that we know yet, but we have improved, is what his words were at the press conference today. So obviously your mind shifts to some bigger things that we can discuss, like quarterback and a running back situation. But those would be the two big concerns or things that are being addressed: alignment and the talent gap. How much those two things have been affected by the results of what Hugh Freeze is doing, we're going to find out very shortly here in a few months.
Yeah, let's get to the quarterback battle. Peyton Thorne transfers in from Michigan State. So Hugh Freeze, non-committal, says it's still a battle, still a competition. Did he talk about what he needs to see out of the guy that he will eventually select?
I don't know that he went into specific details about what he needs to see. There's probably a comment there that I'm forgetting about amongst the thousands of notes I took feverishly during his press conference. But what I did, found interesting is that he name dropped each of the four quarterbacks. Everybody thinks about Peyton Thorne. Everybody thinks about Robbie Ashford. There's also Holden Gerner. There's also this guy, Hank Brown, who he brought in with him in his first recruiting class. Openly said that Hank Brown is a freshman. The indication of what he was kind of expressing there, probably not going to have a lot of opportunities there, but he'll at least have an opportunity. If you get mentioned at SEC Media Days, there's a reason you're being brought up. Everybody is on the board in terms of quarterback. Now, what do we perceive? That's the big question. And I think Hugh would also acknowledge this privately, that Peyton's got the leg up as the experienced guy. And that's what Auburn fans and SEC fans, college football fans should expect. Peyton Thorne, because of that experience, should be the expected starter for now. However, if you're counting out Robbie Ashford in a Hugh Freeze offense, or should I say a Philip Montgomery offense, it's another big topic we can talk about. You've got another thing coming. Even if Peyton Thorne wins this job, Robbie Ashford will be utilized. You do not keep good athletes on the sideline. So no specifics, but just express the need to make a decision on that very quickly. He kind of noted, got to get it down to those three guys after the first day or so. And then after that first week or so, get it down to the two so they can make that final decision on who it's going to be and have alignment at the quarterback position.
Kyle Loomis is here. E2C Network is the destination for Auburn athletics, football in particular, but athletics across the board and activities on campus and the overall Auburn environment, the Auburn family community there on E2C Network. Anything in particular there that we need to spotlight before we move on with the football conversation?
Now, right now, obviously, we're going to be talking a lot of SEC Media Days this afternoon. We'll also be doing a little Q&A with some of our listeners if you want to join us for that, this about 5 p.m. this afternoon. But, stay tuned. The football content is going to be ramping up here. We finally started shutting the door on baseball, and, basketball is kind of in its hiatus. The big thing is we talk about here, E2C, the Auburn experience. We love to share experiences, especially from campus, Tiger walks, Eagle flights, other things. So if you love to get the whole Auburn experience, that's where the place for it.
What players were selected to attend and represent Auburn for Media Days?
3 really good representatives of Auburn. And I think, of course, you're probably saying, if you're a viewer of this, of course, you're going to say that. But I truly do think that. And I don't have time to go into great detail on each of those guys, why that is. Elijah McAllister, first year guy, hadn't even played a snap yet, transfer from Vanderbilt. The moment I saw his commitment and started watching some videos about this guy, I said, that's a leader right there. And the fact that he is representing Auburn after not even representing on the field is not a shock to me. I'm excited what this guy is going to mean to this team on the field, but especially off the field as a leader. When you've got a transition, you have got to have a leader in the locker room that's going to rally everybody behind them, whether it's a defensive guy or an offensive guy. It's hard for a quarterback to really take that right now when there's a quarterback battle. So Elijah McAllister, great representative. Luke Deal, who's unfortunately had some family tragedies while he's been at Auburn, some very sad situation there, but he's handled it with such grace and dignity, and I think that's endeared him to the Auburn family. I won't go into great detail about that, but just what he's meant to Auburn's been awesome. And then Cameron Stutz, who's been a mainstay at the offensive line. He's played a lot and kind of started sometimes, not started. He's one of those guys that represents the holdover across the board of what's been happening the last few years of Auburn. And I hope in what will be his final, I believe he's a junior at this moment, maybe probably a senior, in his final season or two, he's going to get the success that he deserves.
Kyle, what is a successful season for Auburn?
That's the big question, isn't it? To quote SEC Network, it seems like they're going with the 7-5 record should be considered the standard. My operating principle for Auburn in any season outside of extenuating circumstances is 8-4. I think Auburn has the talent base, the support, the environment that you need to reach 8-4 every year as a minimum. So that when I ask what's the success rate going to be this year, that's my starting point. And then when we get information, I work back or forward from that if need be. I'm still kind of holding firm at that 8-4. I will probably find my way to a 7-5 record if you want me just to get into a record discussion when all this is said and done, just because there's so much uncertainty. But really, it's going to be dependent upon if this passing game can get going. And boy, will that make Auburn fans really happy. You've got some great big targets that he's brought in. He talked about a few of those today in the press conference. The defense, I think, is going to be pretty solid, especially on the back end of that with those defensive back group. And mind you, in the recruiting game right now, we're reloading as well. So there's a lot to like. There's a lot to be hopeful for. Auburn's a team that could surprise a lot of people and win 10 games if the stars aligned. But it's also a team that could just squeak into bowl competition if things don't go if they do go the opposite way of that. So I'll hold it 8-4 right now, but I could easily be swayed to 7-5 or 9-3.
So Kyle, I don't know how much time you have for the rest of the rhetoric there at SEC Media Days. Now, of course, the commissioner, Greg Sankey, kicked it off as he does each and every year. And I am always fascinated as to what he had to talk about because of obviously his position in the sport and what's on his mind and what he believes in what is his most prominent address to the media, to the fans the entire year, what he chooses to focus on. And then we heard from Kirby Smart today. We heard from two of the more prominent coaches yesterday, and Brian Kelly at LSU and Jimbo Fisher at Texas A&M. Is there anything else that's been discussed or proclamated from the podium when it comes to the commissioner that caught your ear?
The three topics that caught my ear were Dallas, NIL, and expansion. You've already addressed the Dallas part of that, and it makes a lot of sense. Oklahoma and Texas coming in. As much as I hate that we're getting further and further away from the Birmingham locale for SEC Media Days, which I'm a big fan of, obviously, being my schools in that state, it makes sense. With NIL, I don't know if we're ever going to get any clarity on NIL. It seems like everybody's pushing for the federal level to make those type of decisions and regulations. I don't know how you can instill confidence given what's going on in Washington, not just this year, but all years. So to me, it's more on the NCAA. And I think you heard some of that in reading between the lines of Greg Sankey. Is the only one who's going to solve this is the government, but he didn't say this. I'm saying it for him. Can we really trust that? The NCAA is really the beast that let this cat out of the bag without much perceived forethought. But expansion, he didn't rule out expansion from what I heard in his press conference, but he also was very adamant about what I found interesting, calling the SEC now a super conference. And I don't think that's, a misspeak. I think that was a very intentional, because I've been of the opinion that's where we're headed down the line a few years in terms of conference realignment and expansion. I think super conference is going to become a term that becomes more prevalent, and it shocks me in no way that Greg Sankey brought it up in his press conference.
Kyle Loomis doing fine work there at E2C Network and the Auburn Experience. Head on over there. Check it out right here on YouTube, E2C Network. Kyle, we appreciate you being here. I'm going to track you down again, and we're going to run down these positional units here before we get to fall camp, hopefully.
Yeah, it's going to be fun conversations, and looking forward to it.
All right, Kyle, thank you so much. You have a great day.
War Eagle.
SEC Media Days continue for a second of 4 days, and we are here at the Voice of College Football to break it down for you. We've got Anthony Dasher standing by. He should be jumping on board here in the next 15 to 20 minutes from Rivals, UGAsports.com. That's Anthony Dasher. We've also left the link in the chat for you to jump on and talk college football with us. So again, the link is in the chat if you'd like to talk college football with me. We've got the SEC in play, of course, first and foremost, but anything is on the table concerning college football. And yes, I've been eyeing the chat. It's been rather contentious between the Big Ten and the SEC. Sorry, Big Ten fans. Now we are approaching the dawn of a new season, and everything gets wiped out. In my opinion, if we're just evaluating these conferences and these teams year to year, it all gets wiped out roughly the first day of September. And then we can evaluate the conferences based on what happens on the field this season, 2023. However, we're not there yet. we still have to base our evaluation on what has already transpired. And what we saw in 2022 was just a confirmation of what we saw in 2021 and in 2020 and in 2019. Oh, yeah, 2018, 17, 16, 15, 14. Yes, going back 15 years in that range, 15 to 18 years at least. There was an argument before that, but since 2006, 7 in that range, SEC, and that's the argument. It's over. It's done. Case closed. I wish there was an argument. It would be good for business. It would be good for debate. It would be fun. It would be all those things. But Ohio State and Michigan did not make it an argument in the college football playoff. Not that that would have guaranteed that the result should be the Big Ten's the best, but that's the best way to get it done. Take your best teams, put them in the playoff, and have them win playoff games. They did not win playoff games. They lost playoff games. Now, for those of us who evaluate football and evaluate the performance on the field, can we take away from the Ohio State performance? Yes. I believe the entire nation, anyone with half a brain and a little bit of football sense, took away a certain opinion from the Ohio State-Georgia game. That's obvious. Ohio State competed toe-to-toe, may have outplayed them. The end result was Georgia won the football game. They are the champion. And that's what counts. Now, what counts in regards to evaluation is Ohio State was just as good, if not better, than Georgia on that night. I'm not saying that Ohio State was a better team or as good as Georgia throughout the season. They were not. Georgia did not have a performance all season, of course, like Ohio State did against Michigan. And Michigan cannot lay claim to any kind of supremacy in college football because they can't win a postseason game. And until that gets corrected, Michigan can continue to brag about the Big Ten. And that's a great bragging point. Michigan owns the Big Ten right now. Michigan owns the conference. They have the best record the last 2 years. They have the 2 championships, and they have defeated the school that was prior to 2021 by far the giant and best program in the conference. So, and they brought it back to an argument within the Big Ten. There is an argument between Michigan and Ohio State. Now, Michigan owns the wins that matter. Therefore, they own the conference right now. However, there's an argument to be made about the best program. And Penn State's going to need to win some games against those two to get into the discussion. Penn State is currently not in the discussion. Penn State currently is in its own tier level below the other two and need to start winning games that count and matter within the conference. But Penn State's really good, and we'll see what they have this season. But yeah, the SEC is the best conference, and it's a short debate. And for anyone who says that only Georgia or Georgia, Alabama or Georgia, Alabama, and LSU hold up the conference, that's wrong. Because you can't take schools like South Carolina and Ole Miss and Mississippi State and others in that mid-tier, and you cannot compare them to the top teams in the other conferences. That's not fair. You need to compare that level of team in the SEC to their counterparts in the other conferences. And you know what? They're largely better. There are more of them. The Wisconsin, Iowa layer of teams in the Big Ten, the North Carolina, NC State layer of teams in the ACC, the layer of teams, whether you throw out Oregon State, and others in the Pac-12, in the Big 12 as well. The Big 12 has a glut of those kind of schools: Texas Tech, Kansas State, and others. And I know Kansas State won the Big 12 last year. I'm speaking in generalities. There are more of those schools in the SEC. I would challenge anyone to come on here, take your conference of preference and line up the schools, and just come with your list, 1 through 12, 1 through 14, whatever your conference, and we'll line them up against the SEC. And unfortunately, again, it's not debatable. We've got our first call of the afternoon. We got the real MVP on the line.
Hey, Mark, how you doing this evening?
I am doing just fine. What's going on?
Thank you for clarifying this to the person or people in chat that don't understand that the SEC is head, shoulders, whatever metaphor you want to use, better than your conference. I'm sorry that it upsets people, but Mark, there is a solution to this. Win some football games on the field against some good teams. How about Oregon doesn't lose by 45 plus points to Georgia? How about Michigan beats a team called TCU? TCU? What are they? A Mississippi State level school? An Arkansas level school? Speaking of Arkansas, they beat 3 great non-conference teams by themselves last year. That's basically more the entire Big Ten did last year to all put together. I mean, this is just crazy, Mark. I mean, I just can't believe people still think this. Penn State, their best one was against Utah. Is that correct, Mark?
Yes.
Did Florida also beat Utah? And Florida finished significantly worse in their conference than Penn State did?
Yes, that's an accurate statement, but that's the only opportunity that Penn State had. You know, they played Auburn. Auburn certainly wasn't up to it. So
I get it, but still, it's not like
that. You can't just take that pair of games and say Florida's as good as Penn State.
Oh no, that's not what I'm saying at all. I'm just saying around you beat Utah isn't as impressive to the SEC as they make it out to be. That's all that comment was about. It has nothing to do with pairing Florida to Utah or Florida to Penn State. I mean, Penn State would probably beat Florida. Probably because, I mean, Utah couldn't do it, so who knows?
Yeah, the way I see it is that I do believe that the Big Ten's the second best conference, but I have a more difficult time based on the facts of proving that the Big Ten is better than the other conferences than I do proving that the SEC is the best conference. That is not difficult. It's obvious. It shouldn't even be discussed. I'm here to talk college football all the time, so I am willing and able to have that conversation with anyone and just shoot them down and present the facts as to why the SEC is clearly the best conference. I'm here to do that. Now, the other 4, differentiating the other 4 is more of a challenging exercise.
I would agree with that 100%, Mark. I mean, if you go just solely based on the results on the field, I'm not so sure the Big Ten ended up being the second best conference. Like, it can be argued.
Either. I agree with you. I just believe that. I think I made this statement a number of times after the season. Once I reviewed all the scores, I said, I believe that the Big Ten is the second best conference, but the results don't necessarily show that.
Right. And, you know, Mark, the Mississippi State coach is on the doing his conference right now, I guess you call it. What do you think about Mississippi State? I think they're probably the most intriguing team in the SEC this year. I have no idea where they're going to finish. I could see them finishing like 9-3 or 3-9. What do you think about them?
Yeah, well, I think a lot of people are expecting them to take a step back, and that's out of respect for Mike Leach, and I get that. I think that has less to do with Mike Leach and more to do with the Zach Arnett and how prepared he is for this job. They have their starting quarterback back who's just super proficient. Will Rogers is just exceptional. Now, I don't know if that translates to the next level. I don't think it does at a high level in the NFL, but for a college quarterback, he knows exactly where to place the ball and who to get it to in a short amount of time. They have weapons and skill position players back. Their defense, I believe they bring back about as much as any team in the conference. I've seen a lot of low projections on their win total, and I'm a little higher on them than it apparently is for other people.
Yeah, I think they're probably a 7-5 or 8-4 team personally.
Yeah.
But it's just the head coach. I mean, they're going to change philosophies from something they've been doing for a while, and I don't know how much that's going to impact Will Rogers and the rest of the team. So that's my biggest issue with them this year is, I mean, what if he just turns out to be a really bad head coach, Mark? And that's a possibility. Him turning out to be really good.
Well, they didn't go on a coaching search. They made him the head coach as they needed to, obviously, with a tragedy on their hands, but they didn't say, okay, well, that was just an interim situation for the bowl game, and now we're going on a national search. They were fully committed to Zach Arnett.
Yeah, and the final thing I'll say, Mark, is do you expect the SEC East to finish like what I think last year was the best division in football? Do you think that'll be the case this year?
Yeah, I'm not going to quite go there. Why do you think that the West or the East is better than the West?
They beat the West. Their top teams beat the West, like Tennessee beat Alabama, LSU, Georgia beat LSU.
Sure.
So
last year, yeah.
Yeah, just last year. I'm not talking about 2 years ago, 5 years ago, 8 years ago.
Yeah.
I mean, it's pretty obvious the West was pretty good. Auburn was down. Texas A&M was down. So it was kind of like a perfect storm of things.
I guess I think of it more from the bottom up and see Vandy and Missouri and Florida as not being very good compared to the West.
I guess, but also you got to look at their non-conference wins, and I think Florida, their non-conference win against Utah carries more weight than what some of the West teams did in their entire season, like
Sure.
Texas
And
A&M,
again,
for example.
I'm projecting forward to this season.
I get that. Sorry, this is the actual final thing I'll say. I just saw it pop up. It says Alabama's got a 74% chance to win the SEC West, Mark. What do you think about that?
Well, I think that all is based on, most of that is based on them playing LSU at home. I think that a lot of people think that that's going to be a down to the wire race, and both teams are really good but flawed. Therefore, we're not looking at a situation where, like we've had in the last 2 years and possibly this year, where people expect Ohio State and Michigan to be playing as undefeated teams at the end of the year. They see Bama and LSU tripping up elsewhere, and then they see the home field advantage being a big deal when the two play. And it has historically been huge for Alabama, and it's been almost impossible for LSU, minus Joe Burrow, to go in there and beat Alabama on the road. I'm trying to think. The last game would have been Burrow in 2019 and LSU winning that game. The one before that would have been 2011, the 9-6 overtime game in which Alabama avenged that loss in the BCS championship game. But they've had a rough time in Tuscaloosa, and I think that's where that 74%. I'm on record as saying, when I look at the football power index and then how that translates into these win probabilities, home field advantage is important. Definitely. And it's more important in certain venues than other venues. Nobody's scared going to Georgia Tech to play in Atlanta or Duke or somewhere like that, Piscataway, New Jersey, but it's certainly impactful elsewhere. But I think when you total all the football games, and I would love to do this as an exercise over the course of years, is see how much home field advantage is really that much of a factor. And you would have to only take conference games because the best teams play almost all their conference or their non-conference games at home. So that wouldn't be a fair statistic. I think it's weighted too heavily, and I think that's a little high, but not much.
Okay, Mark, that's all I got for you. Thank you for defending the SEC, and fight on to you.
Thanks, Surreal. I just tell the truth. That's all I do. I'm not defending the SEC. I am just telling the truth. And it's not difficult to determine. It is right there for all to see. The SEC has now won, what is it? 4 consecutive national championships. The SEC has by far the best playoff record of any conference, and it's not even close. And the SEC always has the best winning percentage in non-conference games. And as soon as you jump on the non-conference scheduling of the Citadel and Middle Tennessee State and whomever else comes in from the low group of 5 or the FCS. No, I'm talking about high-level games. I'm talking about the high-level games. If we looked at ranked games, non-conference, the SEC would have a huge advantage over the other conferences. I'm not making this up. You can go dig it up and present it. It's staggering just to look at last season. Look at last season, the teams that the SEC defeated. Ohio State, Oregon, Utah, Clemson twice. We'll take all the bowl teams. Okay. Purdue, Kansas State. Who am I missing? Texas. BYU. Illinois. Pitt. And I know when we get to Illinois and Pitt, a lot of you were out there. I know this because I've been through it enough. Oh, they're really not that good. Well, we're down to about the 10th team, the 10th best team that the SEC has defeated. Illinois and Pitt would be marquee wins for any other conference. The Big Ten last season defeated Notre Dame, Utah, NC State, Kentucky, Oklahoma State, Syracuse. I'm out. That's it. The Pac-12 had this enormous comeback season, and I patted the Pac-12. That's tough to say. I patted the Pac-12 on the back a number of times throughout the season and after the season. Yes, the Pac-12 was so much better. But we're talking about a conference that went 3-16 against the Power 5 the year before. 3-16. And went under 500 against the Mountain West the year before. And the Pac-12 was so much better. And I believe to be the best quarterback conference in college football, both last season and this season. But unfortunately, there are 21 other positions on the field. Okay, the Pac-12 defeated winning teams. Winning teams. What winning teams did the Pac-12 defeat out of conference? Notre Dame twice. North Carolina, Texas, Wisconsin. We're done. That's it. So the wins and losses are clearly there. They are clearly there. And this was not a one-off. We can go season to season to season to season. Now, when some SEC people get on here and they take this overboard, then I pull them back. I certainly pull them back and say, okay, hang on. You're not quite that dominant. There are some ugly losses. Of course, they're a conference of 14 teams. They're going to trip up and have some bad losses, some ugly situations, some App State over Texas A&M type of games. But man, where did the SEC look bad last year? Where did the SEC look bad last year? App State beat Texas A&M. Auburn losing by 4 touchdowns to Penn State, to me, that's not a good look, but they were playing one of the best teams in the country. They were playing a top 7 or 8 team in the country, and Auburn was 2-6 in the SEC. So that to me is not a bad loss. It's an understandable loss. It's what it should be. Texas A&M lost to App State, and that was not a particularly good App State team. That was not the Eli Drinkwitz level 13-1 App State kind of team that we've seen over the last 5 or 6 years. That was a, what they go, 7-7, 7-6. I think they played an extra game. So that was an embarrassing loss. Arkansas losing to Liberty, not a good loss. Shouldn't lose to Liberty. Arkansas is better than Liberty. They were a 2-touchdown favorite. Not an atrocious loss. Liberty has, under Hugh Freeze, got to the point where they were regularly defeating or playing down to the wire really high caliber Wake Forest when they went to the ACC championship game. Power 5 teams. So that's not a good loss. It's not a good loss. It's not horrendous, though. So Liberty over Arkansas, App State over Texas A&M. Ole Miss got blasted by Texas Tech, didn't they? They got blasted by Texas Tech. Got really pounded in that game. So there's no shame in losing to Texas Tech if you're Ole Miss. I thought Ole Miss was better. I still believe they're a more talented team, a better team from week to week, but they got whipped by Texas Tech, blasted in that bowl game. Not a good loss for the SEC there. Georgia, Tennessee, South Carolina. South Carolina lost to Notre Dame. Two good teams, flawed teams, not great teams, 8-4 teams. Game went down to the wire. That was a tremendous game. 45-38 Gator Bowl game. That's not a bad loss for the SEC. That's not a bad loss. Those are two very like teams. Missouri, they lost to Wake Forest by like 1 score in a bowl game. That's not a bad loss. LSU lost by 1 point to a Florida State team that finished 10-3. That's not a bad loss. It was a pick'em game. I'm not finding bad losses in the SEC. I'm finding 3. Yes, Florida lost by 27 points in a bowl game. That doesn't look pretty, but they lost to Oregon State. They should have lost to Oregon State. Oregon State finished 10-3 in the top 15 in the country. Florida finished 6-7. Not a bad loss. Now, again, the score was ugly, but really not a bad loss. I'll even add it because it was 30-3. So the SEC had 3 or 4 bad losses. The Big Ten is Michigan's playoff loss a bad loss? It went down to the last possession and you're playing a playoff team. So I am not going to consider that a bad loss. It could be argued. And I would accept that argument. I would accept that as a valid point. If somebody wanted to say, you know what, that was a bad loss. Bad loss for Michigan, bad loss for the Big Ten. Losing to TCU. I don't consider that a bad loss. But I understand the point. Ohio State, Michigan, Penn State, Maryland, Rutgers, and Indiana. Well, Rutgers and Indiana were just so awful that they didn't suffer any bad losses because they were expected to be just that horrible. Now, Michigan State losing to Washington in the aftermath of the season did not seem like a bad loss, but at the time, Michigan State was the number 12 team in the country. They were the kind of, I think it was a pick'em game, or they were a slight underdog. They got housed by Washington. If you watch the game, don't look at the score. Score was only 11 points. It was a bludgeoning. Wisconsin losing at home to Washington State, that's a bad loss. Can't allow that to happen. Iowa losing to Iowa State at home against the last place team in the Big 12, that's a bad loss. Northwestern is a walking program full of bad losses. They lost to an FCS team. They lost to Miami of Ohio. Nebraska lost to Georgia Southern. So the Big Ten had a couple more bad losses than the SEC, but it was more about who did you defeat. And we could go through the other conferences, but believe me, if you want to collect your data and you want to argue either 2022 or you want to argue the last 5 years, 10 years, 15 years, I would be happy to have that conversation. And again, I say this all the time. I wish it was a debate. I wish it was. I would love for us to fill up the offseason by debating the best conference and to have a legitimate conversation about it. But we can't. We can't. Maybe in 6 months. 6 months? In 6 months. In January, maybe we will be able to debate. And the only conference I can see pulling that off is the Big Ten, of course. You know, let's say USC miraculously wins 2 playoff games and wins the college football national championship. We're not going to be on here talking about the Pac-12 being the best conference. Unless their results back it up, which I can't imagine that happening. And same thing with the ACC. Let's say Florida State or Clemson go on a run. They win their playoff games. They are the national champion. Again, the ACC would just have to overwhelmingly turn around to be regarded as the best conference. What would the ACC have to do this year? Yeah, we got to see Florida State beat LSU. We got to see Clemson win their games against Notre Dame and South Carolina. We need to see North Carolina take care of business and be a better team. We need to see a lot out of the ACC. So really, the Big Ten is the candidate, obviously, because they have the 2 and maybe 3 teams that have a chance of going toe-to-toe with the SEC. And really, the Big Ten's highlight out of conference this past year was a loss. It was a loss. We all know what it was. That was the highlight of the Big Ten season. out of conference. I'm not saying that was the most important game or anything like that. Michigan won the Big Ten. They were the champions. They won the championship. They beat Ohio State. That's all within the conference, what mattered. But Ohio State doing what it did and showing that performance against Georgia, that was in a loss. That was the most impressive thing that happened in the Big Ten the entire season. I believed that Ohio State was capable of that performance. I believed that they could win the game. I knew that they had enough talent to win the game. I didn't expect them to win the game. And a large portion of me thought, because of that defense, because of how they got beat up in the fourth quarter against Michigan and that hangover and really lacking confidence probably at that point, I wasn't going to be surprised with 45-17. But they stood tall. They delivered. They showed up. But still, you got to complete the deal. You got to complete the deal. Otherwise, we're having the conversation we're having, and we're patting Ohio State on the back saying that was a great performance. That was a great effort. You're probably the second best team in the country, blah, 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 blah. But they lost. So that's the Big Ten's highlight. What was the Pac-12's highlight last season? The Pac-12's highlight was they lost the Rose Bowl. They lost the Cotton Bowl. The best team they defeated in non-conference play was Notre Dame. North Carolina? No, Notre Dame. Notre Dame was better than North Carolina. That was the Pac-12's highlight of last season. Beating Notre Dame twice. A Notre Dame team that was not one of their better teams of the Brian Kelly into Marcus Freeman era. When I get into conversations with all of you and there's a scarcity of big wins for any particular conference, or I let people know there aren't that many wins out there. The best wins in college football are typically over the likes of Penn State and Notre Dame and that second level, because those are the teams that are losing 2, 3, 4 games. The rarities are the elite wins, because those teams are going undefeated or losing one game to each other, as was the case in the college football playoff from 2015 through 2021. There were basically 3 components to the college football playoff: the SEC, Clemson, and Ohio State, and they won all the games. And there's your playoff. There's your history of the playoff. And I'll even tack on 2014, even though Oregon won a game at the Rose Bowl. And I will tack on this past season, even though TCU, to their credit, they won the game against Michigan. Those obviously led then to losses in championship games. So for as important as those playoff games are, if they don't result in a championship, then all the games that have mattered, that have either been wins that have led to a championship game win or the championship game win itself, listen to this. There's been 3 components to the entire playoff for 9 seasons: the SEC, Clemson, Ohio State. They're the only 3 that have won any games that have mattered. It really summarizes it right there. They have defeated each other. The SEC has only lost to Clemson and Ohio State. Ohio State has only lost to Clemson and the SEC. Clemson has only lost to Ohio State and the SEC. It's quite remarkable when you think about it that way. All right. We've got a super chat coming in. Appreciate this. Terrence says, Mark, Ohio State tried really hard. Of course they did. You know what? Who else tried hard in that game? Georgia. They tried really hard too. Terrence leaves comments all the time. We appreciate Terrence. I would love Terrence to call in. I don't understand his point most of the time. I know he hates the Big Ten and he hates Ohio State in particular, and that's fine. That's great. I want as many Ohio State haters. I want as many Michigan haters. I want as many Stanford haters, if there is such a thing, to be here, because I just want all of college football universe to be here on our channel. So we welcome all of you. But I just find Terrence's comments amusing because I don't know what the point is, but I appreciate the super chat. So make as many points in that same manner as you would like, Terrence. I think I'm pretty measured with my comments. I'm not patting Ohio State too much on the back for losing a game, because I'm then saying they didn't get it done. They're not the champion. Georgia's the champion. They didn't get it done. But if you have a brain, even if you don't watch football and you have a brain and you understand competition and you understand a scoreboard and you're not colorblind and you can see a red uniform and a white uniform and see guys running around, you could have come to the conclusion these two are really good and they're about equal. That's the only point I'm making. If we solely went by the scores of the games, or not even the scores of the games, let's nix that last statement, not the scores of the games. If we strictly went by the results, meaning it doesn't matter if you win 50-0 or 26-25, and it doesn't in terms of who advances or who wins a championship. If Georgia would have defeated TCU 28-27, is that any different result than what it was? No different result. Georgia is still the national champion. If they would have won that game on a last second, if they would have won that game exactly the way they beat Ohio State, would Georgia be any less of a national champion right now? The answer is no. However, what would all of us be thinking about Georgia? How much differently would we view Georgia? How much differently would we view TCU? If they would have lost the national championship game 28-27 on a missed field goal? And how much different, to a lesser extent, would we view Ohio State? We would have thought, okay, well, TCU took Georgia to the wire too. So, yeah. But that's not what happened. We all get to watch the games. So they don't just report the scores in. They don't go play in obscurity and then report the scores back to us and we just say, okay, or just report the winner back to us. Say Georgia beat Ohio State. Oh, okay. We don't know what happened, but that's the result. That's all that matters. No, we get to watch the game and evaluate the teams. All right. Vaughn. Yes, we have dropped the link in the chat at least 3 times. So I apologize. I need to post it in the description section of the video, and I do apologize for that. And I cannot guarantee that I will correct that moving forward. I corrected it for about 4 consecutive shows, but just, yeah. I have spent the day recording and doing other things, and just, yes, the link should be in the description section of the video. It is not. I'm saying it should be. That's what I should do. But we have dropped it in the chat a number of times. So please call the show and we'll talk some college football. We would love to hear from Vaughn and hear from others. Keep in mind that we've got Anthony Dasher stopping by from Rivals to talk Georgia football and Georgia Media Days. He's there at Media Days, so hopefully Anthony can connect with us. And we will be here. Let's see. It is 4 o'clock. We'll be here until about 5:15 at the latest, unless we don't have too much traffic. But we can hang out until 5:15 Eastern time. And then we've got a run to do the Iowa show at 5:30 Eastern, and Nebraska's tonight at 7. We hope that you will join us for those shows. So please do that. This is an enlightening statement for us right there. Go Tigers, letting us know that LSU runs college football. And this is what's great about college football fans, is they can be delusional. They can think whatever they want. I find it funny that he's, and I assume it's a he, I shouldn't, that they, Go Tigers, is stating on one hand that LSU runs college football. However, they include in their handle LSU's 4-loss season from last year. All right. Here we go. We've got Vaughn stepping in here to talk some college football with us. Let me make sure of something before we do that. All right. We've got Vaughn on the line. Welcome to the Voice of College Football, Vaughn.
Hey, Mark. My internet's not really that well. Can you hear me?
Yeah, we've got a bit of a buzz, but we can hear you.
Okay, hang on 1 second. I may have to drop out. Let's see. Yeah, I'll try again another time. Something's
All right,
going on.
Vaughn. All right, thanks. So we will not have a call from Vaughn. We've dropped the link in the chat. Please join us if you want to talk SEC or college football here at the Voice of College Football. Good time for you to be aware that we've got content all over the place. I've got to get caught up on predictions, but predictions are coming your way. We just recorded today with Pat Murphy from Bucknuts about Ohio State, breaking down the offense and the defense. We appreciate your response to our previous videos that we posted here in the last week, getting you set up for fall camp. We have posted Florida State offense, Alabama offense, Oregon offense, Michigan offense and defense, and others. Clemson, Ohio State are on the way, and others, as we get to as many teams as possible in our fall camp offensive and defensive previews, and also my predictions with various teams. I believe we've got 7 or 8 done, so obviously I've got many to go in delivering predictions for the 2023 season. Check those out. You guys seem to like the rankings videos as well. We've posted Big Ten running back and wide receiver rankings, also top 10 quarterbacks. Check those out, and we will continue to deliver. I've got to also get to my all-time program rankings before the season is definitely upon us. We had hoped to get to those sooner. All-time program rankings. We did deliver our 2023 program rankings, not to be confused with our all-time program rankings that will be coming out soon. Mozart's. I focus on my team too much. I know I have blind spots. We all do. It's good to know that, but I try to watch Mark because he's more well-rounded. Tim is going to save some time. I guess this is all-time rankings. Tim, I think you've got a few others to consider, but he's going Alabama, USC, and the field. You might be forgetting the school with the best winning percentage in history. Possibly. Might be forgetting that. We have got a couple calls coming in. We will get to them now. Welcome, Defiant, here at the Voice of College Football.
Hello, Mark. Hello.
How are you?
I'm doing good, Mark. I'm doing good. Just watching some SEC, media day for the first time in a long time.
Oh yeah, okay.
Yeah. So yesterday, Texas A&M had their media day. Jimbo Fisher came on, and I thought it interesting that he didn't really talk a lot about Bobby Petrino being the offensive coordinator now. I thought that was really interesting that he really didn't go into detail about maybe the scheme he's trying to run or how it's going to work out this season.
Yeah, so I did not catch up with Jimbo Fisher and his comments yet. I did see that reported a number of places, and like you, I found it a bit odd, but we shouldn't be surprised by anything that comes out of Jimbo Fisher's mouth.
Yeah,
At the same time, he was obviously a bit guarded, and I don't have an issue with that when it comes to not wanting to unveil his offense or
yeah,
to be able to. I'm sure. Well, I'm relatively sure that it's been decided who's calling plays.
definitely,
And I take it that he was not wanting to give that up or communicate what the decision was there.
Yeah. But then also too, I did see also as well. He said, yeah, I guess he had a pretty positive attitude or like comment towards Texas. Because they're going to play Texas again. Do you think that rivalry being competitive now with Jimbo Fisher, or think Texas or A&M might dominate the series more?
Well, I don't think anybody's going to dominate that series because nobody's proven to be that good between the two of them. I expect it to be ultra competitive unless something drastically changes. I think Texas historically has always had the upper hand because it's just been a better program, but that's nothing recent. Yeah, had they played last season, yeah, Texas would have been a slight favorite, but slight favorite. Yeah, going forward, I'm glad that the game's being played again. I thought that was a great rivalry that I enjoyed watching almost every year. And I think it's nice that with all this realignment that's tearing most rivalries apart, or a number of them, that this is one that actually brought two rivals back together.
Definitely. And I think Jimbo Fisher likes that he can play Texas again because, again, it's one of probably the greatest rivalries of like the old Southwest Conference. When the Big 12 line, picked up the 4 Texas schools, I think that's one of the rivalries that they wanted to keep when realignment in the 90s, and now to see it again happening next season and for years on, I think it's definitely going to be something interesting to watch again because of all the history they have, but definitely going to be nice and exciting to watch them play again.
And I also have to think, Defiant, that there's a bit of a turn that could take place because of the recruiting portion of this, and with Texas A&M moving to the SEC, even though that has not maybe turned out to be on the field the type surge that Texas A&M fans were hoping, it has been a surge in recruiting. But now with Texas coming to the SEC, I think the recruiting battles are going to be even more fierce. And man, Texas has not needed any help in recruiting, but now with an SEC logo on their shoulder, they're really in a good position to be an elite recruiter.
And I definitely think too, if Texas dominates, maybe goes 8-5 the first year, and A&M struggles again like this year, I think Texas would dominate recruiting more because you see them winning now in a better conference against better competition, while A&M is still struggling to get even 6 wins or 7 wins maybe. So I definitely think if Texas dominates the first year, or maybe goes again 8-5 or 7-6 maybe, and A&M struggles again, I think Texas will start to dominate recruiting more.
Yeah, so I've got to think that there are certain high school recruits who are drawn to the SEC for one or both of 2 reasons, and one would be that they want to play against the best, and they want to play as many NFL players, future NFL players, as possible to prepare and develop them for the next league, for the NFL. And they want to be recognized, they want to be relevant, they want their games to be watched. And when Texas is playing Texas Tech and Kansas State, and we could read off all the teams in the Big 12 not named Oklahoma, yeah, sometimes those games are big, like their game against TCU last year, or sometimes when Oklahoma State's good, but not with the frequency of Texas playing Alabama, LSU, Georgia, and on down the line, of those games being highly watched. So this has to help Texas recruiting. Not that it really needed that much help.
Definitely. I live in Arizona, so I'm in like the Pac-12 country, and this recruits some Arizona that want to play in SEC because again, all the exposure in the TV, because even some games on an SEC network, but it's still almost getting 1 million, people watching them because in the South, football is like the biggest thing. I then definitely think that even out here in Arizona and California, I think some of those recruits want to play in the SEC. Just because, again, you get the exposure. You also play against better recruits. You also potentially get more NIL money from the boosters or whatever than maybe going to like a USC to the Big Ten or even like a Pac-12 school, just because, again, of the exposure they're getting on a week basis now with ESPN, and all the contracts, TV deals they're getting. The Pac-12, I don't think has a TV deal still.
Yeah, it's easy to think of these conference networks as being substandard, but I certainly know from being there at the point of the SEC's launch as a network. I don't know what the case is now, but at the point in which it launched, ESPN pushed that so much and made that such a priority that the SEC network distribution at the time that it launched was just about as high as ESPN2, which is only a shade behind ESPN. They launched in over 90 million homes, something in that range.
Yeah, and I think again, this exposure that you're getting in SEC is way more than the Big Ten, because like the Big Ten, you get a game like on now on NBC, but the Big Ten network is now going to get as much viewers to watch like a Rutgers game or a Maryland game than like a Mississippi State game or even a Vanderbilt game, since they're on an up and up now.
Absolutely. So who's your team?
Indiana. I'm a big Indiana fan, but
You
I do
live in
watch
Arizona.
the SEC.
You're here to talk about the SEC, and you root for Indiana.
Yes,
Okay.
but I do watch more SEC football though, because I do have an SEC network, and but I don't get the Pac-12 network, which you think I would because I live in the area or the region for it. But I watch more SEC football really than anything.
Okay.
And then one last thing, I would want to say this. So when Drinkwitz got the head coaching job at Missouri, did Missouri think that he was going to turn that program around, or were they thinking he was just going to get him competitive again? Because for the past 2 seasons, they've been under 500 at end of the season, only getting 6 wins and losing both their bowl games.
Well, before I answer that, what do you consider to be turning it around at Missouri?
I think 7 to 8 wins. I think as much as Missouri can get now in SEC. If they were still in the Big 12, I would say maybe 8 or 9. But 7 to 8, I think, is what turning it around in quotation marks would be for Missouri football.
Yeah, so Missouri, of course, on occasion would compete for Big 12 championships, but generally was going 7-5, 8-4 in the Big 12. And actually, it stretches in the early 2000s where they were winning 3, 4, 5 games. They come to the Big 10, they win the East twice. But since then, yeah, I don't know what they see of themselves. I would think that Missouri should be expecting a coach to go 7-5, 8-4 on a regular basis, and then to be able to put together a certain team for it to cycle up, for him to have a veteran oriented team, and to catch a few breaks and to compete for a championship once in a while should be the goal at Missouri. And to your point, Eli Drinkwitz, Missouri has not had a winning season since 2018. So they've had 4 consecutive non-winning seasons, 2 500 seasons, 2 6-7 seasons, and Barry Odom had a better record and was outperforming Eli Drinkwitz, and Drinkwitz seems to be fine. Of course, a coach can get fired at any time, but I would think that time's running out on Eli Drinkwitz. If I'm running the show at Missouri, I'm thinking, I need to see some. I'm not seeing any indicators of it getting better. I'd have to go back and look at the recruiting rankings, but the record themselves are not. And Barry Odom at least finished over 500, and Drinkwitz has not. So, yeah, if I'm the AD at Missouri myself, aside from any extreme type injury situations, I would be looking to go 7-5 for him to keep his job.
Yeah, definitely. Because I think now, again, with Texas, Oklahoma joining next year, it's just going to get tougher for Missouri and some of these other programs that haven't been good, but haven't been like bad in the last couple of years. Again, like I think again 7-5, 8-4, I think definitely would be where they want to be at. Because again, I know when they first joined the SEC, 2012 they went 5-7, but 2013, 2014 they both won the East, and 2013 could have made the national championship game. So I think looking back at seeing the early success they had to where they are at now, just being under 500, losing to a good Georgia team. They lost to Georgia last year, but they could beat them. But losing some games I think they should have won, and that could have helped them get a 7-5. Again, I just think maybe, this might be the last couple of years of Drinkwitz, because I know, again, he came from App State. One season at App State went 13-1, and then Missouri hired him. In the COVID year, they went 5-5, which, everybody got past that year. And I think that was what people expected Missouri to be, 500 team. But I think definitely I would like to see maybe 7-5, 8-4, or even a winning season with Eli Drinkwitz. I think maybe the Missouri team wants to see if they could go 6-6, but win a bowl game, because they haven't won a bowl game since 2014. So they're on a little bit of a bowl losing streak here. I definitely probably think that they might want to see a bowl win too as well. Maybe not go 7-5, 8-4, but a bowl win as well.
Yeah, and that is also, I believe, some of the basis of this internal debate within the SEC to play 8 games or to play 9 games. And if you're in Missouri, you certainly want to play 8 games and survive the conference and play 3 or 4 winnable games outside the conference and get to bowl games. And the more games that are played in conference, the more of a struggle it's going to be for Missouri, or pick your team in the mid-tier, Mississippi State, Ole Miss, Arkansas, for those schools to reach bowl games.
Yeah, I think when the Big Ten went to 9 games in 2016, I think it hurt a couple programs in that sense too. I think Missouri can look at maybe a Maryland, I would say, even though Maryland struggled after 2014, maybe like Minnesota for a little while. I think some of the mid-tier teams in the Big Ten, you can look at those teams and see, okay, they struggled playing 9 games, and they're still struggling now a little bit, but they are getting to that 7-8 win threshold that they want to be at. I think, again, just looking at that can show them, okay, we play 9 games, we might not make a bowl game every year. We might not win 7 games every year,
Absolutely. Well, anything else you've got for us?
Maybe Arkansas. Maybe a little bit of Arkansas. I know last year wasn't a good year, 7-6. They did beat Kansas. But do you see them winning 8 games? So 7-8 games this year?
I think that's their ceiling. I think that's a successful season for
because I know they're not getting 9 or 10 games, and then SEC West, because LSU is going to be good, Bama's going to be good, A&M might be okay. I can see them probably being A&M, but I don't see Arkansas winning 9 or 10 games this year.
I really like KJ Jefferson. I think he's made himself a near elite quarterback, and Rocket Sanders is one of the best backs in the country. but they had real problems on defense. They ranked less than 100th in total defense and all the main metrics on that side of the ball, and I don't see where they've really improved themselves that much.
Yeah, are they recruiting okay as well too? Are they recruiting like to their standards again, or
No,
are
they're
they
recruiting okay,
okay?
but in that league, they're recruiting in the bottom 3 to 4 of the conference.
Oh wow, I didn't know that.
Yeah.
I thought maybe now since they're kind of winning again that they'd be kind of up towards the middle of the conference. I know their schedule's kind of favored for them this year to win 7 or 8 games. Take a look at it just really quick. So because they play out of the non-conference, it looks like they go get 3 easy wins potentially against Western Carolina, Kansas State, BYU, and then their first conference game is at LSU.
Their last 3 recruiting classes are 28, 27, and 22 in the nation, which they were playing in any other conference, that would be fine. That would be competitive, but that's better than Missouri. It's better than Vanderbilt, and it's right there with Ole Miss and Mississippi State, and it's below everybody else. And it's right there with Kentucky.
Expect you kind of expect Missouri and Vanderbilt to be towards the bottom of the SEC in terms of recruiting classes year in year out now.
Oh yeah.
Yeah, I know Sam Pittman's doing a good job there, I think. Revitalizing that program that, I shall not name the coach they had before that went 4-18. But yeah, I think Arkansas is gonna be okay. I think again they have some pretty maybe easy non-conference games, and then I think they probably have some easy winnable games in the SEC this year, and some of them are at home. So,
all right, man. Well, thanks for the call. We appreciate it.
Thank you, Mark. Yeah, thank you.
We will keep it moving here at the Voice of College Football. We got Vaughn on the line. Vaughn, hope you can make it through this time.
Yeah, I hope so too.
Sounds better.
I wanted to talk a little bit about the SEC hegemony and how maybe the Big Ten can catch up. It seems to me that what SEC country does really well is their high school football, and high school football doesn't seem to be very important in the Midwest, and that may be because of weather. I don't know, but I think the Big Ten or I think the Midwest country needs to step up their high school football programs and get to the point where there's more football. Of course, not year round because of winter, but a lot more often than what we currently have, because the Big Ten will never catch up to the SEC until those states or that region of the country takes vast steps to improve high school football and produce more higher prospects. And I know that's not going to happen overnight, and I foresee the SEC having another decade or two of hegemony. But I think that's one of the elements that needs to happen for the Big Ten to catch up.
The one major issue that's hurting the Big Ten in all of this is population movement. So the population growth and the movement in the country going south and going west has hurt the Big Ten footprint for decades, and it continues to. So they're fighting an uphill battle when it comes to just the sheer number of athletes in the region. And then the battle becomes worse when, like you say, that the level of high school play isn't what it is in areas of Georgia and Florida. And now, it's kind of surprising to see a state like Alabama that's playing and producing more high school 4 and 5 stars than any state in the Big Ten footprint. And that wasn't the case. You would have never compared Alabama to Ohio or Pennsylvania 20 or 25 years ago in recruiting. But now Alabama's better than Ohio and Pennsylvania.
Yeah, I think there's going to be in a few decades. I think there will be another population shift where the Midwest will become more populous, and I know this is going to sound crazy, but I think climate change is going to kind of drive that as people as I know it sounds crazy, and so I don't want to go too deep in it to rile people up, but
well, I can't say it hasn't crossed my mind that if the climate change is as severe as some people think it is, and I don't want to get into it either because I don't know why it's political, but it is. I think it's more just about what is the science telling us. But if it continues to be 110 degrees in the summer in various locations, then people are going to start to weigh their options, and it would only make sense that it would be warmer in the north than it currently is and has been.
I'm impressed that the Big Ten has been able to remain relevant all these years, given the football product. Ohio State, in my mind, has single-handedly for a long time kept up the conference and kept it relevant. But I think, and I mentioned this in the chat, I think the Big Ten commissioners have been really smart financially, and that's the big reason why the Big Ten is the second best conference. Because as far as like football product, I mean, you can definitely argue, there's some other conferences that may be better. Maybe not. I mean, I don't know from top to bottom, but there's a lot of teams in other conferences that you would think will have better product because, like the ACC, for example, is adjacent to SEC country, and so that they get top talent, but for some reason, the Big Ten has been able to keep itself relevant and keep itself, a distant second place as far as conference dominance, and I attribute that to how smart the commissioners have been with the financial aspect of it and with the TV deals. Because I remember a stretch where the Big Ten maybe had one or two bowl wins in the postseason. Like the Big Ten product was just so bad that we were a laughing stock for a couple of years. And of course, I mean, the SEC will always slap at the Big Ten because they're number one, and rightly so. It's bragging rights. But it surprises me how well the Big Ten has kept itself afloat.
Absolutely. Well, you have a lot of proud tradition in the Big Ten, and you do have high school football play that was strong in certain states, Ohio and Pennsylvania in particular, for a long, long time. So that hasn't completely gone away. And you just have outstanding schools. So for those athletes that care about that, they're going to be drawn to schools that have the academic reputations that Big Ten schools do have and deliver. And these institutions having the kind of alumni bases that they do and the kind of money resources are able to make up for some of that recruiting disadvantage.
Yeah, I think, for the time being, that the SEC is going to be the top dog for another decade plus. But I see college football, trending to just maybe two powerhouse conferences, and then the other conferences will get eaten up, and maybe that's how the Big Ten catches up to the SEC. But thanks, Mark. That's all I wanted to say about that, and just wanted to throw in my 2 cents about the SEC and the Big Ten and how dominant the SEC is, and hopefully the Big Ten can close the gap. And with USC and UCLA coming in, I think that's a step in the right direction.
For sure. All right, Vaughn.
Thank you, Mark.
Appreciate you being here.
Yep.
And we keep it moving here at the Voice of College Football. And again, look at the SEC helmets behind me. We had our set designer come in and put in a good 3 or 4 hours in set design today to make sure that we had the SEC properly presented and represented here at the Voice of College Football. So we just wanted to make sure that you took note of the Georgia, Florida, LSU top shelf, the Tennessee, Ole Miss, and Alabama second shelf, and even Texas A&M and Kentucky. And then I think we ran out of SEC helmets. Excuse me. Yes, that would be the end of the SEC. Well, you know what? That's it for the SEC. We've got 8 SEC helmets. When Oklahoma and Texas join, we'll be up to 10 out of 16. If you would like to contribute to our helmet collection here, the Voice of College Football, stand by. We're not going to take any helmets right now, but we will do that soon. We will get that back cranked up, and we appreciate everyone who has down through the years contributed helmet selections for us. Randy says the Dogs will win 3 championships in a row. Then what are people going to cry about? Go Dogs. Dave, the Big Ten could buy the SEC twice. Cherise says it took Georgia 41 years to finally win another national championship. Blue raised, arm raised, face, blue, smiling face, green, smiling. Yes. Okay. Cherise going back in time to review the Arkansas-Texas rivalry. Brett Bielema's team won that Texas Bowl against Texas 31-7, yes. And then it was a couple years ago, Sam Pittman's team defeated Arkansas and Hudson Card and Company 40-21 in Fayetteville. Remember both of those matchups quite well. And Texas does lead the all-time series 56-23. We will see, since the SEC has not made a commitment to its scheduling format going forward. They simply scheduled 2024 and let us know the approach there, and then they would determine how they were going to continue that approach. And that leads us to believe, it's very simple to see, that there's an internal struggle among the SEC on how they want to approach scheduling in terms of rivalries, numbers of rivalries, 8 games, 9 games, all of that's on the table and yet to be decided. We will see who wins that war, and also consider that the television partner ESPN is involved there as well, to a certain extent. To what extent, I don't know. I know there's, of course, communication there because they have a stake in this and they would like to see more SEC games. Sean would like 9 games and 3 permanent rivals. I am usually convicted on these topics to take a side, and already don't even have to choose a side because I just, in my heart and in my head, I'm convicted about one particular side. When it comes to the SEC playing 8 games or 9 games, I understand both arguments. The argument on the 9-game side is coming from all the other conferences that say, and the other fan bases in the other conferences that say, we play 9 games, you got to play 9 games. No more cream puffs, or not as many cream puffs as you currently play. Play a 9-game regular season. We need to make college football uniform. Totally get that argument. Makes total sense that if one conference plays 9 games, they should all play 9 games. However, let's also understand that hardly anything in college football is uniform. So it's not like everything else is uniform, but we just have this number of conference games as a rogue violator. No. All sorts of things are just dictated by each individual conference. And so let's also understand, again, we'll start with our starting point that the SEC is the best conference, and it is. Therefore, even in playing 8 conference games, one less than just about everyone else, and playing an additional cream puff, and most of them do play an additional cream puff. Not all of them. Florida's got Florida State and Florida has Florida State and Utah this year. Georgia in the past has had Georgia Tech plus another difficult game. They don't this year because the Oklahoma series was canceled. South Carolina has Clemson and North Carolina this year. Last year they had Clemson and somebody. Maybe they didn't last year. But again, there are schools in the SEC that schedule 2 difficult games. Some of them, the minority, play 2 difficult games. So most of them play more cream puffs than, let's say, their Big Ten counterparts. However, I'll take the SEC side because I agree with their side as well. They play the toughest conference. Therefore, their 8 games are tougher than other teams' 9 games. And we also have to understand that while Power 5 games are a measurement of difficulty, that's not the end-all be-all. Cincinnati certainly has been better than Indiana. They just beat Indiana by 3 scores last year. So non-Power 5, Power 5. And I know Cincinnati's a Power 5 now, but I'm saying last year, a non-Power 5. Tulane's better than a lot of Power 5s. So not every, it's only an indicator of how many Power 5 teams that you play, being related directly to the difficulty of the schedule. Yes, Sharice is bringing to the table the Stetson Bennett factor. Can Georgia win a national championship without Stetson Bennett? Can you imagine that being uttered a couple of years ago? Can Georgia possibly win a national championship without Stetson Bennett? As opposed to with Stetson Bennett? Can they win one with Stetson Bennett? Now it's, can they win one without? Don't underestimate SB. Does he have a nickname? Not that I've heard. Edward, get ready to add a Florida State helmet up there. We've got a Florida State helmet, so don't worry about it. We've got Florida State covered. So that is not needed. The issue, I was going to complete my thought on this comment about the 9 conference games and the 3 permanent rivals is I don't need permanent rivals. I don't know why we have to have the same number of permanent rivals for everyone. Don't have to do that. The SEC has been living for 30 years in a place where they felt as though they had to match up permanent rivals across divisions. And a few made sense. Georgia, Auburn, Alabama, Tennessee. Of course, those 2 for sure. LSU, Florida makes sense. Doesn't have to be played, but made sense. Other than that, you're making stuff up. Why make it up? Doesn't have to be made up. Why force Mississippi State and Kentucky to play every year? Why force Ole Miss and Vandy to play every year? Why force the most ludicrous rivalry in the SEC? Texas A&M and South Carolina. I couldn't pick 2 schools that had less to do with each other than those 2 schools in the SEC. So why force 3 rivals? Some schools have 3 rivals. Schedule those games every year. Other schools don't have 3 rivals. Does South Carolina truly have 3 rivals? I don't know if South Carolina truly has any rivals. Georgia's kind of a rival. Tennessee's kind of a rival. Kentucky's kind of a rival. Mississippi State has one true rival, Ole Miss. You don't need to make up other games. I know it makes the schedule less formatted and regimented and more quirky, having to deal with it every year, but it can be better that way. We don't have to make up rivalries. Yes, Sean D., we know who South Carolina's rival is in the Palmetto State, but in conference, yeah. We are awaiting Anthony Dasher rivals Georgia. And then we've got our Iowa and Nebraska shows tonight, folks. So check us out on the Iowa channel coming up at 5:30 Eastern. We always have a great show with Corey Bratta from the Hawkeye of the Storm, talking Iowa football, again, 5:30 Eastern time. And then it's Nebraska Live with Greg Peterson from Husker Online at 7 o'clock Eastern time, 6 Central on the Nebraska channel. SEC Media Days, of course, today was Vanderbilt, Georgia, and Auburn. Check out the conversation we had earlier in this live stream with Kyle Loomis from E2C Network, and we're awaiting Anthony Dasher from Rivals. Vanderbilt, of course, extended Clark Lee about a week ago, right? It was sometime before Media Days where Vanderbilt, coming off their 5-7 season. So imagine that your football team goes 5-7. Your football team goes 2-6 in conference, and they're jumping for joy, and they extend the contract to the head coach. And I'm not saying that Clark Lee does not deserve it, that he did not earn it, but that's just the state of Vanderbilt football. Vanderbilt looking to defeat Kentucky back-to-back seasons for the first time in over a decade, and looking to defeat Florida in back-to-back seasons for the first time since 1946. That's the last time Vandy defeated Florida. Check out a video we posted where we asked the question, is this the year? Fill in the blank. Is this the year? SEC Eastern Division version. Check that out. Looks like we've got a healthy Georgia contingent in here. And wow, Georgia football, huh? Really, the only thing that Kirby Smart needed to talk about is all the issues off the field. It's been a ugly off season for Georgia football. I didn't get to see the complete podium appearance by Kirby Smart. I saw about the first 10 minutes or so. I need to go back and watch the rest, but he talked about Carson Beck and his development, of course. And then, of course, all these issues, all these tragedies that have gone on with this program since the national championship game. It's really odd. It's a bit unsettling in terms of, you've got 105 players, you have support staff, you have coaches. Things are going to happen that are not the prettiest, that are either tragic due to nobody's fault or where people are making bad choices, bad mistakes, and stupid decisions. It's going to happen, especially at that age range. But this offseason, Kirby Smart needs to rein some things in. Seriously. He talked about leadership and the ability of his players to show leadership and why he brought the players that he did. And I was just getting to that part where he talked about leadership, and he mentioned 3 things that he has conveyed to his players about leadership and really to himself. Number one, you've got to make decisions that not everyone is going to agree with. Not everyone is going to enjoy or back all of your decisions. You're going to have to make tough decisions if you're a true leader. You're not going to please everyone. Not everyone's going to like you all the time if you're truly a good leader. What was his third point? Third point about leadership, something about, I'm not coming up with the third point, but they all had to do with making difficult decisions and determining what's best for as many people as possible. Sometimes you have to make a tough decision because it's not in the best interest of 100 people or 1,000 people or 330 million people in the case of the United States. But you have to kind of weigh the pros and cons and determine, is this going to be the best long term? Is this going to be the best for the most people? Is this going to be the best for the people that need it? And he was just starting to talk about complacency and what is going to keep Georgia from complacency. For you folks who run on a regular basis, and it's been a long time since I've run, I'll take a little sprint every so often. I've been playing some softball on Friday nights. That's been fun, but I'm talking about really running. That Kirby Smart told the story about Brock Bowers taking on the other Georgia tight ends, and they were racing 100 yards at a time. So not only is Brock Bowers faster than all the other Georgia tight ends, this is pretty remarkable. The other tight ends were all together. So they were all facing Brock Bowers. So Brock Bowers would run a 100-yard dash against another tight end, and then he had to take on the next tight end. And he was not taking any time off, and the other tight ends were taking the time off, and so they were rested, and Brock Bowers was still defeating all the tight ends. And we've got a guy on that's going to give us a little bit more enlightenment to all of this. Here on the Georgia side, we got Anthony Dasher here from UGAsports.com on Rivals. Anthony, what's going on today?
Hope you can see me in my little cave here, okay? Trying to get out of the way of all the other media people here a little bit.
we got you, Anthony. How are you?
Doing good, man.
Anthony joining us from SEC Media Days. Anthony, when you came on, I was just telling the story that Kirby Smart was telling about Brock Bowers taking on all the other tight ends and being able to outrun them, even though he didn't have any rest. So he'd have to face a completely rested player, and he still whipped them all in the 100-yard dash.
Yeah, it was a little what they call a box drill. They have to run up and down the sideline, but apparently, on one of the runs, it's like 100% run. The next time he's supposed to jog, the other two tight ends were going to ran the whole time full speed, but forcing Brock to do the same. He did. He still wound up. So he's pretty much.
Hey, Anthony, what I really wanted to hear out of Kirby Smart, because the football's pretty obvious. The challenge in football and where they stand, and really that they're just needing to stay out of their own way. They just need to stay focused and stay at the task at hand. But it was more about what has been a pretty unsettling off season off the field. Sure. And, your thoughts about what Kirby Smart had to say in addressing, the issues with the program and what's been going on.
Well, first of all, I'll be surprised. I'm surprised really only one question was asked during the big media scrum, and that was about some of the super speeding issues that Georgia and Kirby have acknowledged from day one that's a huge problem. That's something they got to find an answer to. Because you can't have not just a football player, but it would be you, anybody else in the public can't go speed 80, 90 miles per hour and put people's lives in danger. That's something they got to find an answer to. But some of the other stuff, the applications about electoral constitution that Georgia, quote unquote, tolerates, sexual misbehavior. That's something I can tell you is 100%, every one of the three players who have been already questioned, one man came off immediately, the other two guys, Georgia, so Georgia tolerates that kind of misbehavior. I got to argue with that just a little bit. The speed, no doubt. I think Kirby Smart
Anthony, unfortunately, the audio is just really chopped up, and unfortunately, we can't make it out. You've been frozen there for a while, and that would be fine if we had the audio coming through, but unfortunately, I can't quite make anything out. But we appreciate you being here, Anthony. Yeah, hit me up, and we'll see. And
okay.
Appreciate you, and have a good time at SEC Media Days, and we'll catch up soon. All right, Anthony Dasher, Rivals. We've had him on a number of times, and unfortunately, we couldn't hear from Anthony. He's buried in wherever they are. They're in Nashville. I don't know exactly where at SEC Media Days, but we'll catch up with Anthony hopefully later tonight or at some point this week. And we've basically lined up a media rep for just about every team in the SEC. Sorry, Vandy, don't have any Vandy media contacts. Vandy, I'm missing Vandy, Mizzou, and somebody else. Somebody else I can't think of. But I believe we've lined up 11 of the 14 teams, media contributors. So be looking out for those, either live streams or videos. And again, appreciate your support and appreciate you guys catching our prediction videos and then also the fall camp previews that we're delivering. We've done Oregon, Michigan, Florida State, Alabama. We've got Clemson ready to roll. We've got Ohio State ready to post and many others here at the Voice of College Football. We've got Iowa Live coming up at 5:30 Eastern, 4:30 Central. That as well. So there's some big news concerning Iowa football. Unfortunately, another tragedy. Speaking of a day of tragedies, we talked at the Ohio State live stream about, unfortunately, Carnell Tate's mother was shot and killed in a drive-by shooting last night in Chicago. And a former Iowa player has also passed away here in the last 24 hours. So again, Iowa Live at 5:30 Eastern, Nebraska Live at 7 Eastern on those channels, and we will see you then.